Hello everyone, welcome in. I am Zenny, and today we're going to be reading a fic titled Ripples on Deep Water by an Orphan Account. Today will be chapter 28, titled Bad Company. Summary. Izuku panics and beats up a serial killer, and Shota doesn't know how to deal with, feelings. Oh, this was such a bad idea. When he blinked the spots out of his eyes, Stain had already leapt up to the rooftop with a growl. Boy, who are you? Fuck. He did not think this through at all. I'm Nyx, he told the villain in monotone. Heard you were the hero killer. Do you do requests? That pulled the noseless man up short. Do I what? Nah, forget it. Anyway, I just kind of wanted to know how you judged if someone was a good or bad hero. I want to be a good hero when I graduate. Stain looked at him briefly before puffing up his chest a little. A true hero does their work for the love of saving people, not the money or fame. He tapped his chin and thought, so all underground heroes are good heroes? Stain paused. What do you mean? I mean, underground heroics is really unforgiving. A lot of them die in their first 5 years on the job, plus no media attention. Fame is out of the question, and they're really underpaid for the difficulty of the jobs they do, so wouldn't underground heroes be good heroes? The other looked like he was genuinely reevaluating his life choices. Yes, I suppose so. Okay, cool. Is your quirk something to do with intelligence, Nyx? Oh, Stain actually remembered his name. That's probably not good. No. Really? What then, charisma? Fuck, he ran through every lie-telling tip he knew of when he stuttered out his answer. Well, it's kinda embarrassing. More embarrassing than looking up blood? Aha! Wait, blood, paralysis, that's not comforting. I have a tentacle for a... Stain held up his hands, and Izuku made a big show about rubbing the back of his head. Forgot I asked. He centered his weight, hefting his blades. Step aside, and you won't have to die. I'm interested to see where you go in life, little hero. Izuku bit his tongue. I don't know. I think I'd be a pretty shitty hero if I just let 4 people die. Sorry, man. Stain huffed in amusement. Very well, then. Die like a true hero, boy. In the corner of his eye, Izuku saw Toshi twitch. Zuko, for fuck's sake, you idiot! Oh, so they could still talk. Well, time for plan B. B as in be as stupid as possible and pull a whole plan out of his ass. He looked past Stain and froze. That's a weird place to put a car. Almost on cue, something in that direction exploded, and Stain turned around to look. His mistake. There was a pink pearl in Izuku's hand and flying from it in moments, and it connected with Stain's face. Just as he got turned back around, the pink pearl completely glued his mouth shut. No hard feelings, Izuku shrugged. Just gotta survive, you know? Stain flashed forward, and Izuku barely raised his lightning rods in time to parry them. Metal clashed and electricity sparked, driving the villain back for only a moment before he lunged again, and Izuku had to move again. Fuck. Ida! He yelled at the boy who was starting to lift himself up from his pool of blood. Don't be a shitbag and get help! This is my fight! Fuck you! Izuku barely rolled out of the way of a knife Stain through before pain exploded in his vision as a completely different knife embedded itself in his shoulder. Fucking hell! Hey, asshole, your knives are tiny! He grabbed the hilt and jerked it from his shoulder, tucking it awkwardly into his belt. Sensei, if Mindfuck can talk, can you use your quirk? There was a pause as his teacher grunted, and Izuku awkwardly ducked to another blade and slid to the side of another knife. Where the fuck was he getting all this shit? A coil of white shot out and wrapped around Stain's ankle, and Izuku felt all too familiar tears of pure relief swell in his eyes, cool and refreshing on his clammy, sweaty face. Stain yelled in alarm as he pitched downwards, muffled considerably by the pink stuff, and Aizawa was on him in moments, capture weapon moving at impossible speeds and his own seldom-used knife flashing to parry Stain's blades. Izuku understood in barely a moment. If his teacher hadn't been caught off guard, Stain wouldn't have taken him out so easily. Izuku had to take a few steps back to avoid getting hit, seeing Toshi in the corner of his eye helping up Ida and Native, but he was entranced. The two matched speeds, looking almost like a brutal dance rather than a battle. Scarlet painted their skin, Stain unable to take advantage of it, and both showing no signs of slowing. Siri jumped onto his shoulders and slid down into his arms, turning into a crossbow. Izuku's hands fumbled at his belt, hands running over darts with shaking fingers and picking one out, loading it into the crossbow and aiming it. He had zero experience with ranged weapons like this, and that was the only thought on his mind as he looked down the scope. Siri was saying something he couldn't hear. Aizawa and Stain were locked in a deadly dance, and he prayed for the second time that day, hoping beyond hope that he wouldn't hit his teacher. Stain stopped in his assault for a moment, and Shota stepped back in alarm. The villain's eyes were wide as he swayed on his feet before stumbling, taking one step, two, and collapsing on the ground. From the back of his neck, a dart with a gray plume had sprouted. Shota glanced over at his interns. Shinso was checking Ida and Native's injuries with unsure hands, but it was Midoriya that caught his attention. He couldn't see the smaller teen's face, but his gloves were pulled tight over his knuckles as he gripped a crossbow, still looking down the scope, and aimed at Stain despite the crossbow not being loaded. "Boss, you're okay. You didn't hit the Aizawa. You're okay. You're safe." Siri's voice seemed to have no impact on the teen, who was actually shaking, and Shota cursed himself internally. He should have led with this capture weapon when Shinso brainwashed Stain. He should have told them to run. He should have thought to use his quirk sooner without prompting from a kid. Shota bound Stain tightly, picking his way over the roof and carefully pushing Siri down until she was aimed at the roof tiles. Midoriya was frozen, and Shota carefully laid his hand on his head, between the two ears sticking up and right under the hood of the cloak. "You did good, problem child." That jolted Midoriya from whatever reverie he was stuck in, and the boy let out a choked sound, stumbling back and his arms going around his head. I could have killed you." Fuck, of course that'd be what Midoriya was stuck on. Rather than taking out a major villain, he ran through everything he knew about Midoriya for what felt like the 20th time in those 2 days. Had it really only been 2 days? These kids could have died. These kids could have been killed either by Stain or smashed under rubble, like... He cut off his own wild thoughts. Focus on the kid. "I'll probably blackmail Snipe into helping you with your aim," he told Midoriya as calmly as he could, considering the situation. "Can't take down villains if you're always worried about hitting your teammates." Shota continued to go off on a ramble worthy of Midoriya himself about different ways to improve his aim, trying to focus on logistics, like Midoriya was familiar with, instead of drawing his attention back to what could have happened. You know, like a hypocrite. At some point, Midoriya yanked off the mask to wipe his tears away, hood pulled at his shoulders and crossbow clattering to the ground, becoming Siri in mere moments. Out of fucking nowhere, Midoriya crashed into him. Shota tensed, ready to throw off the kid, before he realized that the kid had wrapped his arms around his chest in a short person's version of a hug, while his shoulders shook, as he very obviously cried. Affection? In this economy? Shota hesitantly carted his hands through Midoriya's long hair, which had been pulled into a messy bun earlier, likely by Shinso, with Midoriya's lack of skill during doing hair. Shota's calm came alive, and Shinso's voice came through it softly. "He trusts you, you know." Shota looked over at the tall teen, who looked back with mirrored lenses. "He doesn't like being touched by people he doesn't trust." It took Hatsume months. Carefully, slowly, Shota stooped a bit to awkwardly rub Midoriya's back. Shinso shot him a thumbs up before going back to prying Ida's broken armor apart so the one-eye student could climb out of it. Ida was getting his ass lectured to hell and back when they were safe. After several minutes, Midoriya pulled away, wiping at his face furiously before pulling his mask back on, flipping the hood up, and looking at the ground. "Sorry I almost shot you." Shota snorted, surprising even himself. "Kid, if I couldn't power through a sleeping dart, I couldn't call myself Eraserhead." There was a small crowd of heroes beginning to gather, namely Endeavor with Manuel and Todoroki. Todoroki's eyes were narrowed, and Shota glared right back. "Stupid fucking media vultures." "What the hell are you standing around for?" he growled. "Are the Nomu taken care of?" As Endeavor nodded before going off on a tangent, Todoroki suddenly looked up. There was a sound of wingbeats. Shota dropped to the ground, shouting for his interns to do the same, just as something swept over his head. Midoriya yelled, and Shinso shrieked something incomprehensible. A winged Nomu had its claws deep in Midoriya's shoulder, trying to carry off the smaller teen, who was repeatedly stabbing it with 2 sparking rods. The Nomu spasmed, slowly rising from the ground, and Shinso yelling at it with his own bow staff out and whacking it. There was a ripping sound, and stain flew through the air at the Nomu. 3 knives impaled themselves in the Nomu's brain, and it hit the floor, Midoriya collapsing in a heap. Shota swore, reaching for his capture weapon, which lay torn on the ground where Stain had lain. Siri streaked across the pavement to Midoriya, and Shinso was frozen in place. Not that Shota could blame him. Stain stood on the Nomu's corpse, a sudden pressure in the air. He lifted his swords. "I will rid this world of fake heroes," Stain announced, his head held high, and Shota felt his throat close. "Society has become overrun with liars and fakes, only out for the fame and money. I alone can cleanse the disease. The only one who can kill me is All Might himself." Stain paused, looking over the crowd with an eerie sort of satisfaction, before pointing his sword right at Midoriya. "And him." Midoriya had something in his hands, and Stain's eyes widened minutely. "Shut that ugly-ass mouth, you noseless bastard!" A dart sprouted exactly where his nose should have been, its feather the same gray as before. Stain fell like a rock. Midoriya rose, visibly shaking, and stumbled over to Shinso before his legs gave out, falling forwards, and Shinso quickly extending his arms to catch the small support student, hefting him to his chest in a bridal carry. Manuel started clearing the vultures out as the ambulances showed up, sirens wailing, just as Shota really started to feel his wounds. He refused to take his own ambulance, instead opting to take the same as his 2 problem children. He didn't trust them alone for 1 second. Even if one was unconscious, they'd find a way to cause trouble. He trusts you, you know. There was no power on earth that would make him violate that fragile trust he had built. The smell of blood and antiseptic in the ambulance brought back memories of a blood-stained body bag being carried past, a pale, bruised hand hanging out of it, and seeing white hair dyed red adorning an unrecognizable face through the unzipped fabric. There was no way, in heaven or hell, he was going to let another intern die on his watch. That's the end of the chapter. Oh my god, the way that this chapter mixes the crack and the angst of like Oberon's death and shit. Oh, it always hits me so hard. I love it. I love it so much. If you guys loved it as much as I do, you can leave a like or comment down below, or you can click the link to the fic that's in the description and go leave kudos and a comment over there. And if you want to hear more from this podcast and from me, feel free to press the little subscribe button down below, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.